I want to welcome everyone. Hello, thank you for joining us today. My name is Jane, and I'm the Outreach and Training Coordinator here at Soluno. I'm really excited to be able to welcome you to our inaugural webinar. We're thrilled to be able to have this occasion to share Soluno with you all. It's grown and changed dramatically over the past year, and we're looking forward to going over some of the top highlights that have happened so far this year. And now it's my great pleasure to welcome our guest speaker, Deborah Schaefer. Debbie, we're so very grateful that you've been able to take time out of your incredibly busy schedule to join us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm sure many of you in the audience know Debbie already, but for those of you who haven't met her before, Debbie's a certified public accountant in Connecticut and New York, and she's worked in the computer audit and consulting divisions of several national accounting firms. She's the owner of a software consulting company as well. And for the past 35 years, she's specialized in the selection, implementation, training, and support of computer-based accounting systems for law firms. Debbie has a deep knowledge of the legal market, and she uses it to assist firms both in the US and internationally. And so I'd like to get started right away. And Debbie, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Thank you so much. So happy that you have a picture of me and you don't actually see me. For those of you who, all of us living in this COVID world, I have not gotten a haircut since March, and so I have a COVID hairstyle, which I don't really care to share all the time. We are going to get started right away into our agenda. It is a great pleasure to be able to be here to present to you about the Soluno software. It's been 3 years since I've done my first installation of Soluno, and the package looks completely different. I want to compliment the people at Soluno for listening to you, for listening to me, for really taking the input of all of us and continually improving upon the software. I think it's come a tremendous way, and every day it gets better. So we are going to talk about the new features basically broken out into several different sections: usability, client matter, data entry, billing, accounting, reporting, dashboards, integrations, and then, as Jane said, a question and answer session. Some of these enhancements overlap in certain areas, so I'll do my best to stay on focus, stay on task, and we'll move right ahead. So the first section of our enhancements is basically usability. All of the things that have been added to make it a little bit easier to use Soluno. The very first item is a right click. I'm not sure how many of you have actually seen this, but in Soluno itself, wherever you are, it doesn't matter where you are, you can actually just right click on your mouse. Oh, I'm hung up. Isn't that great? Love that when that happens. You can right click on your mouse and then you will get this little pop-up that looks just like this on the bottom. In here, you can type in a name or file information, press the I, and it brings you right to File Manager or Contact Manager. From there, you can do anything within that functionality. It also brings up on the bottom favorites. And these favorites are set inside your user settings. And we're going to get into that a little bit on another slide so I can show you that user profile. And so you can select features within Soluno that you use all the time, and then you can just click on this feature and it'll immediately bring you to that part of the software. So instead of clicking through the menus, you can right click, get all your favorites, and then just move very quickly within the program itself. Now, with the right click, some of you who are used to using Windows command with the right click, sometimes your right click Windows commands don't work. So you can use the controls in the right click, or if you press your control key and right click, you will get your regular right click functionality. So the copy and paste, I'm not a great control C or V user because I'm an old lady and it's hard to teach me new tricks. But for those of you who are used to using those, that's great. For those of you like me who are used to using, here we go. Very good. So you right click, here's all your functionality. This is what I wanted to display to you, where you can move so quickly. So if you want to use a regular right click functionality in the program, if you just hit your control key and your right click, you'll get all of your Windows things right there. So that's something very important as you start to use the right click. It's a great feature, and I'm going to show you how to set up those preferences. All settings have been changed to toggles. So you'll see everywhere in your reports, in your settings within the system, where you have a choice to turn something on or off. It's all done now through a toggle switch. Blue is off, green is on. This is everywhere within the program. It's not just in one screen, so it's hard for me to show you this. It's everywhere throughout Soluno. The next item is two-factor authentication, and this is really very important. In the world of COVID and even before, security has been one of my major concerns. It's really why I became involved in lots of the software packages that I currently represent. And so with dual authentication, what that means is when you go to log into Soluno, you will of course enter your username and your password, which is your email and a password. But with the two-factor authentication, once you do that, you will be prompted to authenticate. That second level of authentication really gives far more security to whatever application you're working on. I recommend two-factor authentication for any cloud-based product. That includes Office 365. I have been hacked on my email using Office 365, and I installed two-factor authentication, which means if someone tries to open my email from any device, I'm going to get a text message. That happens to be the two-factor authentication I chose. But you can authenticate either using a text to your phone number, either using an email address, which an email will be sent to you, or by using any authentication apps. Duo is one I use for many clients to get on there, but other people do have these apps. So this is something that you're going to control in your user settings. This little person up top, this is user settings that's unique just to you. That means that this has something to do with you, not the whole firm. You can change your name here. This is where you can turn on your two-factor authentication and determine how you're going to use it. It's also in these user settings that you're able to create your favorites. So everybody can create their own favorites for that right click. And as soon as you click on something, it's going to fill in that star, and now it becomes part of your favorites. So it's really in this user profile that you control a lot of things about yourself. And so it's important to take a look and make sure you look in there, and of course, turn on your own two-factor authentication. Now, this is something that can be turned on for the whole firm, and that's basically done in the security and administrative settings. But each individual user can do it on their own. I suggest there be a firm policy. I think it is certainly a lot more secure that way. And here we go into those user settings again, where you can change your passwords and your verification question. So as you all know, the first time you log into Soluno, you get asked about that verification question. Any of you who might not know, anything can be put in here. The only criteria is that the answer and the question have to be at least 8 characters. So you can't put my dog's name and then put Spot. It's not going to work. Spot is just not long enough for 8 characters. So it's in here that you can reset, change your password. And again, as I showed you about your favorites, the other thing in here that you may want to see is that auto expand those activity codes. Some people hate that, some people love it, but this is where you turn that on and off as well. Okay, so that user settings are very important. You can also submit feedback to Devlos, which I often recommend that you do. If there's something in Soluno that you want to see added, changed, let them know. They listen. It's really refreshing. Okay, security. Security has been changed a bit for contacts and for files. For those of you who've been on the software for some time, you may recall that when we had security for contacts and case files, it was a little cumbersome. It's very nice what they've done is they've now given different sections for each of those security. I don't know why I can't do this. Here we go. Here's your contacts. You can identify which contacts people can see. And of course, under case files, what there was before is you could say view all, and as soon as you say view all, you can now edit this area. Dashboards, which I'm going to talk about later, also has its own security, and I will go over this as we get to that area later. Okay, so in the security, you do have that enhancement for everything related to contact records. Now we're going to get into the client matter information and what the enhancements are in that area. So the first and most important thing is that now they allow you to have a different numbering sequence for a client, for a vendor, and other. What is other? Other is someone who might be a contact on a file. It might be just an independent contact record that you want. With the integration to Outlook, you can share contacts with Outlook now. So if you want to have a contact record for an accountant for someone else, you can put that in, attach it to a file like you always could, but they will have a different numbering sequence. So once you turn this feature on and you go to add a new contact, first thing you're prompted for is what kind of contact is that? When you select vendor, which is a great thing to know, it automatically fills in the fact that, hey, yeah, this is a vendor. You know that when you add a contact record directly from an operating out, or you add a contact record from someplace within the system, like opening up a new file, it automatically knows what contact record that is. So when you hit the plus sign here, it's going to open up a new vendor. Now, again, I turned that numbering on by going into firm, by going into file, and you'll see right down here, it says use separate numbers for client, vendor, and contact types. Okay, so it's really a great feature, and I think it's very helpful to everybody. Now we have an option to use separate attachments on each invoice. This is available when you choose the correspondence method of email or print and email. And this is set in the billing file defaults under each contact, and you can tell it to use a separate attachment for each invoice. So if you're billing by client, each invoice will get its own PDF. And that's what this basically does. Okay, so that's set again in the contact record. Referral sources have been expanded. Referral sources are on contact records and they are also on file records. So when you go into a record, you will notice now, I'm going to go cancel and I'm going to go into my file manager because this is where I typically think of referred information. You'll notice that it can be by user, which is anybody who's a user in the system. It can be by a contact record. So I could set up a contact record for someone who's constantly referring cases to me. If I'm a PI firm, maybe it's a chiropractor or a doctor, who knows? And then source is a freehand field that you can type in anything you want. Webinar, presentation, yellow pages advertising. And of course, we're able to report, Soluno is able to report to you on a list of clients, on payment allocation, on billings journal. If we add those totals on there, you'll be able to see the totals by referral source. For many people, that's very important because they do pay their referrals, and it's important for them to know how the cases are coming in the firm. So I think it's a great feature that you're able to do that. Conflict search. Conflict search has been changed so much since when we first started. It used to be a very laborious report run very slowly. Doug has made tremendous inroads, making this a lot more efficient. What I always tell people in Soluno is that yes, reports might take a little bit more time, but again, you can always start a report and maneuver someplace else and come back to it. So the very important things are now you can have an exact match. So if you need John Smith, you use the tilde as the space, and it's going to match exactly John Smith. If you just did Smith, you could get 100 Smiths, whereas if you can add that first name, it's going to give you better matches. Every name that you do in a conflict search is separated by a semicolon, and so you can do as many names as you want. I have had situations where firms have acquired other firms and they've needed to do conflict searches for hundreds of names. They were able to dump the names in there and do the one search all at one time. As you know, Soluno does integrate with NetDocuments, which I'll get to later, but it's a great integration. And when you do your conflict search, you are now prompted as to whether you want to include those NetDocs records or not. When we include NetDocs, you should expect to get a much larger list because it is not just looking at the name of the document, it's looking at the content of that document. So it's important to know when you choose this conflict search and you are doing that NetDocs integration, whether you really want to include those NetDoc documents as well. I don't know if any of you have ever noticed this, but I think it's a great feature in the conflict search is that it also presents deleted records. So if someone had done something, deleted it, there you go, it wouldn't show. Last night I was contacted by a very old time client of mine. The bookkeeper had retired. The bookkeeper before her had stolen money from the firm. The bookkeeper after her stole money from the firm. So again, it's important to have these audit trails so that you guys know what's going on in your firms. The results of the conflict search will show 250 results. So as I said, if you're putting in lots of names, if you're doing net documents, you could get lots of hits. So if a user who does not have administrative rights comes to you and said the conflict report doesn't show everything, they are limited on the results. So it's 250 results for a user and 1,000 for an administrator. So that's basically the enhancements to the conflict search. In the file manager and the contact manager, they've added these really cool little icons. I don't know if anybody even noticed them, but this little icon, the clipboard, this allows you to copy and paste, and then you can put this in any document in any place you want, because all I do now is I just click paste and there is my address. Pretty cool, easy way to bring stuff in. The other thing is if you ever wanted to, you could use MapQuest, or this will tell you exactly where this location is. Can't say that I've used that, but I've definitely used the clipboard. The other thing that's been enhanced is that now we show not just the responsible attorney, but we also show the assigned and the lead attorney right here on the header of the file. I think that's very important for firms that really do use that information and need to know who is assigned to that case as they go through and work the case. So those are the enhancements that have been added to right here, both the file manager and honestly in the contact manager, the icons are there as well. File number display. So as you know, when you type in a file number, if it contains an alpha character, that alpha character is in lowercase. Many firms don't like that on their bills. So they have added a feature in system settings under file where you can say, any time that I have a file number that has an alpha character, I want it to show in uppercase. So that will be on an invoice, it will be on a report, it will be on any form in here. So it is a way for you to now get those fields to show in uppercase. I have had lots of requests for this, so it really was a terrific enhancement to have. Now we're going to get into the data entries portion of our enhancements. Okay, so the timesheet has been changed. Those of you who have noticed, there's now another field for, oops, sorry about that. Okay, there's now another field that's been added. It's called billable. I don't know if that's going to keep popping, you guys, but we'll see. So here we go. On my timesheet, sorry about that. On my timesheet, you'll notice that now we have a billable column. It's a really important column. And when I do my training on Soluno, I tell everybody about it. What happens is when you enter a time entry, by default, it is always going to make the billable and the working time the same. So whatever you entered it here, it's always going to be the same at the time that you create the time entry. When this gets adjusted is when bills are in review. And if someone has worked 3 hours on something, but we can only charge the client for 1 hour or 2 hours, we simply leave the working alone and change the billable. This enables us to really track the productivity of the timekeepers to know what they've actually worked versus what they've actually billed. It doesn't create a non-billable entry or create a fake entry. All that it does is keep it on that original entry, which I think is terrific. Now, when I do my training, Sometimes I recommend to people who use the timesheet and get confused with these two columns that they can click on these bars. It's called a hamburger bar, a hamburger menu, and you can turn off that billable column so no one even needs to see it. And this way there's no mistakes. I do have situations where people have come in and they've not put anything in working and just put everything in billable. And then when they go to look at their dashboard on the calendar, they want to know why none of their time shows. It's the working time that shows on the dashboard calendar. It's the working field that is the most important during time entry and time tracking. So if it becomes a nuisance, again, this is a user setting. When you change it on your Soluno, it only stays in effect for when you log in. So if you want to train other people in your firm, they can hide this billable column. Maybe many firms don't even care about that. They can hide the column and no one even has to look at it. So there we go. That is what the billable column is about. I think it's fabulous because it gives much more information to the people who are really reviewing and controlling the work in the firm. So this is going to show up on the daily time summary, both billable and workable. We do have time reports now based upon time worked, based upon billed. So that is very important for you to know. Oops, did I miss a slide? I want to make sure. No. Okay. Trust transfers. This is gigantic. For those of you who are coming from legacy products where you were able to create one trust transfer at the time of billing, one check, one EFT, this has been changed. It's a great feature, one I really asked for a while, and I'm happy to have it. What this does is when checks are created at the time of billing and they are sent to batch, you can come in here and you can mark all those checks. You can say print now or never print, assign them the same check number. If you're going to print them, Soluno will automatically do that. And it will combine all of those checks on one transaction. When you look at the journals, you will see the individual transactions. They will all be assigned the same check number. However, when you go to do your bank rec, they'll be combined as one transaction. Under banking, you will see that right here, it says merge and assign the check number for printing. Many of my firms will just merge this for checks printed to and from the firm, which would be those trust transactions. For other firms, you may want it to apply to both firm and vendor checks or just vendor checks. No one does just vendor, but it would be checks to vendors for both firm and vendor or just checks to and from the firm. Notice the merge date, because sometimes bills are not always finished on the same date. And depending upon the date that you have on your bill, it may be that there might be checks for multiple dates. Do you always want to merge them? Do you want to use the date of the latest check? Or do you want to do today if it's later than the latest check? To me, I see uses for all of them. And so depending upon how you do your billing and how you merge these checks together, you determine what dating is best for you. But the point of this is that when everybody goes in and does all their billing and you get those trust transfers, you can now combine them into one total, because typically that's how the money is moved from the trust account to the general account. So it's a fabulous feature. It's something that's been added. You can also select the type of check that you want to do for those trust transfers. So again, inside system settings, where we go into banking, you will see that over here, you can, it's not here, it's under features. I love when I do this and I don't know where I'm going. I think it is under banking. Oh, I'm sorry that I can't find it, but there is a way to determine where you want the check sent. Someone will come back and tell me this. Here we go, right here. Trust transfers at the time of billing should be created as. You now have a choice whether you want them created as a check or just as an EFT. They will still go to batch check processing so that you can assign the same number and combine them, but that is your choice how you want them to be generated. Okay, multiple check layouts. This is amazing. We can now have multiple check layouts. When we first started with Soluno, you had to use the same format for all bank accounts. That's no longer required. Soluno can work with you. They have to do this setup. It's not something you can do, but you can let them know that maybe your trust check looks different than your general check. You might be using different types of layouts. Maybe it's by the bank, maybe it's by the user. So again, you can have different check layouts for the checks that you print, and you just have to let the tech support people at Soluno know, and they will take care of this and they will assign those check layouts for you, as well as customize those check layouts for you. Okay, Nacha. So what this is, most of you probably know this as positive pay. So with all the fraud that's going on with these law firms and in your trust account and your operating account, the banks require that you send to them on a daily basis a list of all checks that have been generated by bank account. Now, each bank typically has their own layout for what they want uploaded to the bank each night. So as long as you get that layout and you configure your bank account properly under bank accounts, you put in all of the information that is required over here. This is very important. Then they can define the template that you're going to use. So what happens is at the end of the day, after you're done with all of your checks, you come into here, and obviously I don't have it set up, and you're able to generate the file that can then be uploaded to the bank. And basically the file is just a check register that shows exactly what checks have been written, and so that the bank knows what they can clear and what they can't. So this is a fabulous feature because I have found so many of my clients are having to do this in order to make sure that the bank is only cashing real checks and not fraudulent. Payables. What we've done, what they have done, I haven't done anything except install it. So what they have done is they've now said that explanations on the payable can carry over into the general ledger. That's gigantic. So instead of seeing on the general ledger where it might just say accounts payable check, what you would now see is you will see the actual description that was put on the payable itself. I don't know what dates I have in here. Sorry. All right, let me just get the right date. 1/1/19 should work for me, and then today. And so when you get that list of your transactions on the general ledger, instead of this saying AP payment, it's actually going to have the exact description that you put on the payable itself. So it's an easier way to track your transactions as they go through the general ledger. The other thing that they've added to the payables is AP checks now have more space for the invoices that are being paid. Because when you typically pay a payable, you're not paying one invoice, you might be paying multiple invoices for that vendor. So they've added on the check stub the ability for you to show more invoice numbers that are being paid. They've also added matter numbers on the check stub. So I think that that is a terrific enhancement. Again, this preserve payable is under settings firms and under banking. Check requests. So I've had lots of clients ask me for this. So again, you can see it's in that description that you would have the different information. So many of my clients have asked me that when they give operating out security to someone, that they only want those people to be able to do a request. And so when they do a request, we can force them to print the request at the time they enter the check request. So for those people who only have request rights, we, Soluno, can now ensure that they print every one of those check requests. And that's set up under here, under banking, the same spot that the other one was set up. We can now do blended tax payments. What this really means is that if you are in a state or in a country that requires tax payments, that requires you charge tax to your clients, when you receive a partial payment and it includes tax, Soluno will automatically proportionately allocate the payment between fees, disbursements, and tax. So in older systems and legacy systems, and before this enhancement was made, what would happen is payments would come in, they would pay taxes, they would pay disbursements, and then fees. So unfortunately, for those of you who have to print reports of income by tax jurisdiction, the taxes wouldn't match necessarily what you collected. So this is a fabulous feature that allows all receipts to be proportionately allocated to the taxes based upon what gets received. 3 decimal expense rate. For those of you who are doing leads-based billing, e-billing, it is very important on your activity codes, especially for photocopies or whatever it might be, when we have a photocopy charge, that you are able to put in 3 characters for that photocopy. So you'll notice here, I can now have, this could be 0.151, whatever, obviously 0 isn't going to work, but whatever you need that to be. And that is very important because as those charges are being charged to the client, those decimal points make a difference between pennies or a penny, and it's very important. So that feature has been added now to those soft costs that you're going to need. You can have it any place in the system. Now we're going to go into billing. Okay, so much has been changed here. First and foremost, used to be on the bills, we could never expose an activity code. Well, that's important for those of you who are doing e-billing. I need to be able to see on the review status exactly what codes are there. So I need to know whether there is a task code, whether there's an activity code as I go through my review process. So now we have the ability to actually add those codes to either a pre-bill or a bill. And that is a wonderful feature. And that can be set on each template. So if you have a template for just electronic bills, then we can put that as a never show or whatever you want it to be. The invoice templates can now hide adjustments to flat fees. What does that mean? If you go ahead and you do a flat fee bill, when you create that bill, what will happen is on that invoice, you're going to get another entry. It's a bill adjustment up or down to force that bill to be that flat fee. Well, I don't necessarily want the client to see that adjustment. So on those flat fee templates, typically we don't display the rate or the amount on each time entry. So now we have the ability in the templates, which I'm not sure how many of you have been into the templates or not, but on the template itself, we now have the ability to say whether we want to break out the discount or not, whether we want to show that to the client. Invoice templates can just display the flat fee amount. In the beginning, we didn't have that ability, so it would show amount and you couldn't just put the flat fee amount. Now I can create the templates so that instead of having, lines on each one, we just have that flat fee amount on the bottom. Makes the bills look so nice. I'm sure all of you will agree with me that the bills presentation in Soluno is really so professional, looks so great. We have the ability to now have a start date on our past due notices. So we used to have just an end date. Now, if you wanted to, you can do a start date as well. So if you are converted from an old legacy system and you have some garbage in there that is showing up on your statements, you can say, don't show that and just choose your dates. Okay, ability to recreate bills and do settlement statements. So very important. So when you go into your billing module and you go to request invoice, if you put in, and this does require that you do put in a file number first, on the bottom, you now have something called settlement statement. What a settlement statement will allow you to do is to produce a document that shows all time entries, all disbursements, all receipts, all trust transactions for the life of the file. It doesn't matter what invoice they were billed on, whether they're billed or unbilled, but you do get a document that shows you all of those transactions that were there. It's a fabulous statement. Many of my clients use it for court when they have to show a history of a case. It's terrific. And again, you get to pick whether you want all items or just ones that have been invoiced. And you do get to pick a start date. But what else is in here is the ability to recreate an invoice. So if you have a legacy system that you're coming from and you want to recreate an invoice that was done in that legacy system, you can do that. You simply come in here, you specify your file, and when you start typing in the invoice box, any invoices that are on the file will show. I happen to pick a file that I must not have invoiced. But again, if there are invoices on this particular file, you can choose that invoice number and Soluno will create an invoice in the current format of all the entries that were included in that bill. So if a client needs to get a copy of a bill from your legacy system, and you may not have brought over all the PDFs from your legacy system, at least you have the ability to recreate that and go further and have that right there. So I think that's a wonderful feature between the settlement statement and the recreating of invoices. I think it's fabulous and gives you a lot more usage in the system. They have added some new e-billing formats, now CouncilLink and Open Invoice. There is the international format, Leads 2.0. I'm not sure how many of you have been there. When I first started with Soluno, all they had was Leads 1998B. Now, obviously, they added so many more. And with some of these layouts, you have different fields that are required. Obviously, the client matter number is what's assigned on the website for this particular file that you're going to be billing electronically. And there are some systems that do require that you use a specific client ID and not the client ID that you are using in Soluno. So now you have the ability to put that in. If you leave this field blank, it will by default use the number assigned to the client contact in the file itself. Obviously, the description is either interim, initial, or final. I don't even know how much they check on these. Most times I tell people to just put interim. But the ability to have the different layouts and to put that client ID is what the enhancement is really about. Invoice templates. So much has been changed on the invoice templates as time has gone on. Alan Tuback, who is one of the owners of the system, he is my template king. Templates have to be modified using HTML code. Those of you who know me know that, yes, I can program, but it is not my forte. But I am now also an HTML queen. Certainly no competition to Alan, but I've learned a lot. And so by doing these HTML templates, you can specify specific fields, you can specify where you want things to show up, how you want things to show up. As most of you have noticed, we've been able to add your logos to the templates. But what is so important is that as you, the customer, has requested more information on your bills, Soluno has kept up by giving us other tokens or pieces of information that we can now add on the bill. So this slide is telling you that, number one, you can choose your font for the entire invoice. You don't have to choose a font that Soluno chose. You can have fields that we can calculate. I can now put fields in that might calculate a discount, even though we don't specifically offer a prepaid discount through Soluno. If a firm wants to offer that prepaid discount, I can calculate it using a formula on that particular template. We now have the ability to specify draft versus final. So I can specify that the logo on the top of your bill template only shows on a final bill and not on the draft. You don't need that. We can specify the client number on there, a communication method. I can even include the responsible attorney. One other feature that I think is really terrific about the templates is the ability to take this little box over here, the comment box. You can put a billing note on a file, and then I can use that billing note directly on the bill itself. This has become extremely useful for many of my clients on Soluno who do flat fee billing. So what we can do is all the time entries can stay there on the bill. It shows in draft, but when I do the final bill, I can create a billing note, put that in there, and then the bill will just say services rendered for and whatever you type in there, and that can be changed on every single bill. Gives a lot of flexibility to flat fee billing. Another thing that's been enhanced in the billing is the ability for us to do paragraph billing. I'm not even sure if we did this in here, and maybe I forgot this on this particular section. So I just reviewed the slides and I don't remember, and I apologize. But on the bill itself, I can say on the billing template that I want to take all of my fees and I want to put them together. I want to combine the fees for the description invoicing. And what it does is it takes the description of every fee entry and combines them in a paragraph separated by a semicolon. So again, I can say never, on the draft only, or only on, whenever you want to see that. So obviously, if you're going to combine your fees into a paragraph, on your final bill, you're not going to show the date or any of these other fields in most cases. But for those people who do paragraph billing, that's great. Obviously, we're never going to set that up on an e-bill, and it's not going to work on an e-bill. All right, invoice templates continued. Non-billable time. So this is a change for many people who have come from legacy systems. When you enter a time entry and you choose to use that code NBW, that means that there's non-billable work that you're doing on a file. That non-billable work will not by default show on an invoice. It will show on the file itself for productivity purposes, but it will not be shown on an invoice. If I change this to be NC for no charge, what this will do is this will show this time entry on the bill, but in the amount column, it can say whatever you want. By default, most people will say no charge. So any zero no charge entry, which has a zero value, will be no charge. Now, this gets a little confusing, but I think it's worth going over. When you're using your no charge, you want to make sure that in your rate table, you have an entry that says NC for that task code and the rate is 0. So whomever uses NC on a time entry, Soluno will automatically change that rate to 0. And so I, by habit now, will create an NC entry in every one of my rate tables so that I know anybody who enters that no charge time entry, it will show as no charge on the file. Now, let me get back to what I was talking about, because how similar of me to always get a little distracted. But in my billing groups, I have the ability to say to not my billing group, my file group. I have the ability to say inside my file group that I want all my non-billable client work to be marked as billed. So even though I'm tracking that work that I'm never going to bill the client, I don't want it staying in WIP or showing up on the next pre-bill that I do. So Soluno now has added the ability where you can say if you are using NBW, non-billable client work, that those entries, although they are not showing on the bill, are being marked as being billed as the invoice is being generated, so that you don't have those entries hanging out on your WIP when you don't need to see them. Okay, so that's what this is about. We do have the ability to say the no charge, just as I said. Another big thing is invoice numbering. In the beginning, you could not change invoice numbers in Soluno. Now they've allowed you to do that. If you have administrator rights, you'll notice down here, you can change the invoice number to be whatever you want. I do caution you though, because I had a situation this morning where I did a conversion from another application, and in that application, they allowed the user to have duplicate invoice numbers on a file. Soluno doesn't like that. So I was trying to write up or write down some invoices and I was unable to, because the same invoice number existed on the same file. Now, if you use split billing in Soluno, which you all know how that works, you get to come in here on the file itself. You're going to say that I want to split my bill amongst multiple contacts. All those contacts need to be linked under the group member over here in order to be able to show up on that split billing. But when you do split billing in Soluno, it will give each invoice number a sub number, even though it's the same number. but I just caution you to be very careful with the invoice number changing. You don't want to go and reset it to 1 if you've already started at 1. But a lot of people, if they undo a bill and they redo it, they want to give it the same invoice number. Or if a client calls and they have to make enhancements on your bills, then they have to make changes. They can undo the bill and then reissue that bill under that same invoice number. But you'll want to keep note, if you change that invoice number going back, you want to change it back to the next invoice number. Okay. So we have the option now, which this is amazing. When we say that we want to send a bill, and this is set under bill file settings under the group as print or as email or none for the e-billing, when you set this to email and you finalize a bill, those bills can automatically go into held emails instead of just going right out. Always made me a little nervous that bills were sent without a review. Now we can do that. So now in the system settings, under features, we have the ability to create hold emails for manual release. It's one of the first things I turn on when I do an implementation, because I feel a lot better, especially during that first billing cycle, that we can review those emails prior to just having them go out to clients. Okay, so that's what that feature is about, and I think it's wonderful. And what happens is once an invoice is on the held email queue, just so that you know, if you decide that invoice is completed, if it's on this list, that invoice is done. If you want to undo it, you can delete it and undo it. If you choose not to send that email, then you can garbage can it. If by some chance you have a file set up as email and there's no email address, it's going to come here when you try to email it, because it's going to tell you that there was an error and why. If you try to send bills out and you have not configured your email, then they are all going to come here and they're all going to end up in that held email queue because it's not configured to send emails. So the good thing about this is you know why you've got the error and what's going on. Okay, new check options. Options to consolidate
Deb,
multiple.
sorry, can I just jump in for a second?
Sure.
I know I was checking the time for you. It's almost coming up to 10:02, just so you know. And I see that you're at slide 37. So we can continue on, no problem, and maybe even go into that half-hour Q&A beyond the 2 o'clock if we need to,
Perfect.
whatever you'd like.
I'll be close.
Okay, awesome, thanks.
Perfect. So as we talked about before, the ability to consolidate multiple payments onto one check, that's for your trust check and for your vendors. But there is also another thing that's been added to Soluno, and that's the ability to put an alternate payee name on a check. So I do a lot of work for IP firms. I saw a couple of you are on here. When you create a contact record, and as you all know, you can have as many addresses as you want. So you can create multiple addresses. When you go to print that AP check, if you click on the check itself in the address box, you are able to, when you go to print the check, I can do it in operating out, I'm able to choose a different address. You'll see that there'll be something where you can select which address you want. I think it's a great feature in case you have to send a check to an alternate place. Okay, now we're going to get into the accounting. So, number one, bank reconciliation. Doug has done an amazing job making bank reconciliation a little bit more user-friendly. So, the first thing I want to say to you is, for those of you who have been using this for quite some time, I don't know what I have in here, we'll see. But when you would go to the reconciliation, you used to have to click over here to get it done. Guess what? No more. You can click anywhere in that transaction. How great is that? Another thing which would drive me crazy, because I actually do a lot of bank recs for my clients, is when the report came out, it was not sorted in check number order. So for those of you who do bank recs all the time, check number order is paramount. We now can print those reports in check number order. Doug has also made it a lot easier to drag and drop and create a deposit slip if you need to. And so it is simply just a drag and drop, and it will come right in here and create that deposit slip for you. It's also easier now to know if you have a receipt that you've put on a deposit slip that's dated in the future, and so you don't see it on your bank rec. Now it's going to show you, hey, I have a receipt that's from this particular month, but it's on a future deposit slip. Makes it a little bit easier to find things. And then the pluses. So if I come in here, I can see what checks are in that deposit slip. Same thing on the plus. When I go to the bank reconciliation and I take a look at those transactions, I can see what's on those deposit slips. Makes it so much easier to know what's going on. So that is a fabulous enhancement in bank rec. All of you who don't know this, but you need to know that you can drag and drop your bank statement in a QuickBooks format, and it makes the bank recs go a lot quicker. And I think I covered everything on here. Financial statements now on your general ledger, if you want to show, and this is based upon how you set up your chart of accounts, but if you are using both departments and cost centers, this can now show up on the detailed general ledger. So this is very important for those of you that are doing cost centers, maybe by attorney, by office, or whatever it might be, that can now show up on the general ledger report. Reporting. We have all sorts of productivity reports that have been added since the start of Soluno. And these are the reports that you're going to use to determine how your timekeepers are working, whether you're making money on your files or not. And there's 4 basic areas: billing, time worked, time entered. And when you go to the productivity reports, you'll see that there's 2 flavors of each layout. One is a summary, one is detail. Billing productivity is the amount billed by working attorney by responsible attorney. So you'll see for each attorney that's working on cases, whose cases they're working on. And again, most of this is all grouped by that responsible attorney and by the timekeeper itself. I suggest you all print these reports and look at them, and that's the best way for you to determine which one is going to be most useful for the management of your firm. But the reports are terrific, and just like any other report, they can also be dumped to Excel or a PDF. On the receivable report, we've now given you the option to group your receivables by responsible attorney. So if you don't want to do one report by responsible attorney, you want the whole report by responsible attorney, that now happens, and you get a new page for each lawyer. This is a default, by the way, so for those of you who don't want that, just be aware of that. You need to uncheck it just to get a full receivable report for the firm. Now we get into the dashboards. This is fabulous. So everybody likes a picture. Picture tells 1,000 words. So here's your heat map. This shows you all the time that the timekeeper has entered. You used to only be able to see your own. Now they've enhanced it. If you have admin rights, you can see anybody's time. You can click on a day, see your time entries. If you are linked to Office 365, which I recommend everybody does, in the bottom right and left-hand corner of the day, you will see emails and you will see events. You can click on the day, see the emails and the events, and on the right side of each of those entries, you have the option to create a time entry or attach it to a file. And if you don't want to see it anymore, you can just delete it. But it is a great feature for those of you who do your time entry based upon emails, which is quite a few, which I know quite a few lawyers do. Please also notice on the bottom that we do have goals that are set, and people can see what goal and where they are on their goals. Then you get an overview, which basically shows you a graphic image of all the time that you've worked. This is where we start to look at that billable versus working amount. And you can see the differences when there are differences. Again, based upon your rights, you'll be able to see your own, you'll be able to see the firm summary, and then each individual timekeeper. We have a cash flow tab now, which will not only show you your bank balances, but will also show you where you are in the firm based upon what's outstanding in payables, what's outstanding in receivables, where is your WIP. so that you can determine, hey, yeah, this is billable, this is not billable. Obviously, for some firms, this is not effective, but for most hourly billed firms, this is actually very effective. You can look out and see what your monthly payments and billings have been. And then the last tab is about the files. So again, this tells me about my files and where I stand on my files, how much money I have in trust, how much money I have in receivables, how much money I have in retainers. And again, if you have rights, not only can you see your own, but you can see other people's in the firm. So the dashboards have been wonderful, gives you a snapshot of where you are, really helps the timekeeper budget and know where they're going. Bank balances are showed along with that banking cash flow report, as I've mentioned, and then the file, which shows you exactly where you stand on all of your files and how much you have outstanding, retainers, all that information at a moment's notice. Integrations. This has been tremendously enhanced. LawPay. We now integrate with LawPay and Fat Merchant. And what this does is, number one, you can actually put a link on the bills that get emailed, and then that link can be clicked by your client. They can go right to the payment service and make their payments. So it really is terrific. Receipts automatically get shown in Soluno. When you go into Soluno and you go to operating in or trust in, depending upon where you've linked your LawPay, you'll get on the bottom of your screen. Love when this happens when I do this, but I'm on a demo server, so that's why it happens. I won't, oh, there we go. Okay, so what happens in the operating in transaction is down here in the bottom right-hand corner. If you are linked to one of the payment services, it's going to tell you how many receipts are there waiting to be brought into Soluno. So basically what happens is you click on that and you see the receipt and you can make sure it's allocated to the right file. Okay, so that is basically your LawPay link. It's terrific. We also link to Fat Merchant, which is not on there, but it's the same thing. Office 365. As I've said, you have that ability to link to your Office 365. Your emails and your calendar appointments will show up on your calendar, but you also have the ability to transfer contacts between Outlook and Soluno. When you set up your link to Office 365, you determine how that link is going to work. Do you only want to do it manually? Do you want it to happen just for your stuff? I suggest that you do it manually. And the reason being is because after lots of years of experience, there have been so many situations where people's Outlook contacts have been messed up because there's duplicates or whatever it might be. So it's my recommendation, if you're going to do the transfers for contacts, that you do it conservatively so that you don't have a mess in your Outlook. Other integrations are World Docs, Fat Merchant, CasePeer, which is a practice management system mostly used by personal injury firms. Obviously, Net Documents, I mentioned that. The great integration with Net Documents is once you have that integration, when you go to File Manager, you're able to look at all your Net documents right within File Manager. You just log in and then all of your Net Documents screen would just show right here. It's terrific. Yo Concierge, which is another practice management, Legal Grow. And I happen to know that they are also very close to having an easy integration with something like CopyTrack or anything like that, where you have a copy machine. And there's a couple of others that I'm privy to know that are coming down the pike that will really be here sooner than you think. So for those firms that need a little bit more calendaring or case management, you're going to see these integrations grow. And that was my slideshow with a minute to spare. I think I did pretty good. So there you go. Are there any questions?
That was amazing, Deb. Thanks so much. You brought it right in under the buzzer. You should be an auctioneer in your next life.
Maybe.
I do have a couple of questions that I think are still outstanding. And just a reminder, anyone else who wants to send one through chat, please do so. We'd like to go over those as many as we can before our half hour is over. Deb, the first question I have that's come to me is about headings on bills. It says, can I change the heading on a bill? For instance, change timekeeper to lawyer or attorney?
Excellent, excellent question. Another enhancement that did not make it into our slideshow, but yes, after much arguments with Doug, and I'm not going to lie, some of this was arguments, over here we can now change, where am I doing that? I can change the description on any of these. How do I do it, Alan? I forgot. I'm so sorry. I'm so stupid.
Double click.
But double click. There we go. Thank you. So when you double click on the heading, you can type in whatever you want. This is one that I know most people don't like, which is fee earner. Most people do not like that. So you can now put in timekeeper. And then everywhere on the heading of your bill, it's going to say timekeeper. Anywhere where it said fee earner, it will now get changed. So you have the ability to change any of the headings on any of the items, both in fees and disbursements. Excellent question.
Awesome. Okay, I think I have another question here, and it has to do with dashboard rights. So it's asking, does the person have to have full admin rights to see others, or is it an option to give to someone who may not have full admin rights?
So under security, when you go into time entries, it's here that determines the rights to those dashboards. So if someone who's in a group where they can look at other people's time, then they can see other people's dashboards. Typically, the way that I do a lot of my security, very honestly, is I create groups by type of employee. Like I might have partners, paralegal, associate, where partners can look at everybody's time. Associates can only see their own, and a paralegal, depending upon whether they have billing rights or not, may be able to see others. So it's actually determined in security by each individual, by the group that they are in. I hope that answered that.
Okay, so moving along, we have another one about invoices, and it's asking, do the legacy invoices converted from other systems, recreated invoices in brackets, show the link for the LawPay link?
Yeah. Alan, why not?
So any invoice that was created before the LawPay was turned on will not show. So because what actually happens with the LawPay link is at the time that Soluno creates the invoice, at that point it uploads it to LawPay to get the URL. So what your client can do is, if you send out your generic LawPay link to your client and they know how much they need to pay off, they can go into your portal, put in $1,000 or whatever it might be. That payment still comes back into Soluno, but you would have to then allocate it to those invoices.
Okay, awesome. Okay, we'll move along to the third one then. This one's asking, how do we link the Outlook to Soluno?
So that is done under the user set profile, under your own user profile. And you'll see over here, there is a section that's called under user profile, Microsoft account. When you click sign in, you're immediately directed to the Microsoft Office 365 login screen. You follow the prompts, and that's how it creates that link.
All right. Question number 4, it's asking, can you print pre-bills off of lead attorney, or does it only allow to print from responsible?
At this point, it's only responsible. Again, that's the reason why you have the feedback here. Let them know what you want. But at this moment, request invoice is only done by responsible. And when we go into review charges to print them, the only one I'm seeing is responsible. So I'm sorry, that is the way it is right now.
All right. Another question. Can you please go over how to separate the invoices into single PDFs?
Yes. So what happens is there is a setting, and that's under firm. Whoops, sorry, close. It's under firm. It's under file, Alan. I know he's here to help me.
Sorry, what's the feature you're looking for there?
Separate PDFs when you bill by client.
Yeah, you got me there. I know it's somewhere. I just don't know exactly where.
Use C name versus number. Hold on, let's go back to my PowerPoint.
You had it early on.
Yeah, sorry about that. Shows you how much I use that feature. I apologize. I think it was up, actually. It might be under here. It was under file. Here you go. No, that's one. Okay, this is under on the file itself. This might be under a contact record too. Let's take a quick look. So on here, under here, billing settings has to be on the contact record. Here we go, billing settings, and here you go, right here. When I make this email, do you see how this now I can change it? So it's under contact, it's under billing filing defaults. The correspondence method has to be either email or print an email, and then you can designate that you want a separate attachment for each email, for each invoice. Apologize.
All right. Okay, another question. Can we update the saved invoice to capture within the printable area? Otherwise, I have to print, scan, and save without clipping the edges. Did you hear that okay?
Yeah, I did. Alan, you want to come in on that one?
I'm not sure what the ask is for that.
So when you come in to do an invoice, I assume she wants to know if you can save it without printing it. So I'm not sure, like, here's just a little tip that I can give you. Every time you create a PDF anywhere in Soluno, what I always do is I always say show in folder. All of everything that you generate in Soluno automatically gets entered into your downloads folder on your computer. So if there's something that you want to save or you want to move someplace else, what I do is I go into the download folder, and then from here I can cut, copy, do whatever you want. I typically will cut it from here. I'll put it in the folder I want it to go to, and then I rename it, because obviously these names don't mean much to me. So maybe that would work for what you're trying to do. I mean, here's an invoice. I can do the same thing here. I can, copy it to another folder without having to print it, scan it, and do something else. So even if, like, I had a client call me this morning, she had done some PDFs and she couldn't get to them. All I did was go to her download folder for yesterday and I could find all of them. Now, as you also know, you've got the bell and you've got your documents in here as well. So I think between your download folder and the bell, you should be able to get anything you need without having to print and scan it. But I'm happy to answer that again if I didn't do it right.
Okay, so if there's a follow-up needed, then whoever put that question in, feel free to clarify on the chat. So we'll move along for now. The next question is, does the Soluno software work with Microsoft SharePoint?
Excellent question. At this point, there really is no link to SharePoint. It's a great question though, Alan. Great feature. You have anything more to say?
So we are planning on working with a company that does integrate with SharePoint. It's a product called Law Toolbox. The integration that we are working on will be in the new year. So they have a full integration with SharePoint and the Office 365 ecosystem.
So the one thing about Law Toolbox that's really a great solution, it's one that I've been working with the guys at Soluno with, is they have calendaring, and in the they use your Outlook. Everything's done within Office 365. So on the calendar, you can associate any appointment to a file, and then when you create a file in Soluno, it automatically will go to Law Toolbox. And when it goes to Law Toolbox, what Law Toolbox does is it actually creates the directory hierarchy in SharePoint for you. So Law Toolbox is one of those products that really has taken advantage of Office 365 capabilities, and they've taken a liking to Soluno. So it will be a good integration when it's done.
Excellent. Okay, another question. Do you have to use email billing for the client to pay by LawPay? Or can you have it set up for invoices we manually email out?
I'll take that question. So you don't have to always send out the link. You can opt that the link does not go to your client and just only include it on the invoice. But what you could do is, if you go into the contact manager, you can go and request a link. So Deb, if you can just go there for a second, down to the bottom, under the billing section. Oh, you don't have LawPay turned on. So in and around here, there'll be a section to say request updated credit card link. And then you can take that and email that out to the client if they want to specifically pay that invoice. The other alternative is just to send them to your generic LawPay link account, or your account link, but then they would have to specify what the invoice number and amount is. And then when that payment comes back into Soluno, you will have to apply it to that invoice.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Alan. Another question. It says, hi, we are using the 365 integration. Just wondering if there's a way yet to select multiple emails at a time to link to a file.
Not at this stage, but it is a request that we've heard before. So we will look at that.
Okay, excellent. Next one, it's asking, can you have a 50-50 responsible lawyer on a file?
Yes, you can. When you go into the file itself, and you go into file staff, it all depends upon how you want to do the allocation. So if you want to allocate by responsible attorney, you can create it there as 50-50. If you want to allocate by fee credit lawyer, then I can't do a 50-50 responsible. But if you're not using the introducing, you could put it in there. Alan, did I do that right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, another one. Is there a setting that allows costs or expenses paid after the end of the month to be billed on the current invoice? For example, fees end date is October 31st, but you have an expense on November 1st that you want to include. Can this be done automatically?
It can't be done automatically, but I'm sure that you've noticed that when you go to edit your pre-bills, if there are expenses on a later date, they will show here. You can just check mark it.
All right. All right.
Or
Excellent.
you could extend your cutoff date. You could also extend your cutoff date here, and then select the chart, the fees that you want, and all the expenses would come in checked.
Okay, so a couple of different options there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Another question, we've still got some time left, which is great. It's asking, when will the LawPay Soluno integration allow a client to pay on an AR in addition to a current balance due? Also, when will the integration allow for a partial payments?
So we are dependent on the LawPay portal. We actually have that question into the LawPay team. So it's got absolutely nothing to do with how the integration works. It's a feature enhancement that has to be made on the LawPay side. So we are in contact with the LawPay development and product team to see when we can actually allow partial payments and payments of and overpayments, which will pay off previous AR.
Okay. Another one, it's asking, it says, sorry if I missed this, but can we please review how to add or edit a timekeeper's hourly rate?
Absolutely. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to go into administrative settings. You're going to go under rates and codes, and then you'll be under rate groups. So you can create as many rate groups as you want. One of the things that I think Soluno did very well with this is give you the ability to customize the rate groups. So the first thing is here I have a standard rate group. I have all my timekeepers identified with a rate. you'll notice that my very first entry in this rate table has no fee earner and no task code. So if by some chance I've missed a timekeeper giving them a rate, they will default to 200. If you want to change or add a rate for someone, you simply click on the word add and it asks you to fill in the fields. So for instance, if I know that Alan Tuback, his rates are going to go up effective 1/1/21, and he's now going to be at $4.50 an hour, all I do is I add this new rate. And now Soluno knows, hey, as soon as January 1st comes, anybody who's using this standard rate group, Alan will now be at 450. So that's one way. If I have a brand new timekeeper, I can come in here and add a rate. So here's firm. I set this up to give firm. It's a long story. It's irrelevant. So you can actually put in, and whenever I create a new rate for a new timekeeper, it's my habit that I always start at a month beginning, because if that person just started and maybe they're going to enter time for prior days, I don't want to make the effective date today, because anything that they enter with a date before today won't have a rate. And then you simply just put the rate in for that timekeeper, and then it creates a record here. So remember, in the rate table, I can specify rates by fee earner or timekeeper, which you see I'm always saying, or I can specify by a task code. Now, one of the things, obviously, after you enter the rates and you save this, what I was alluding to before is that you could have a sub-rate under standard rates. So maybe I have some files where Doug Dagworthy is going to charge $250. What I've done is I've made this a sub-rate group of standard. So what that means is on the file, when I specify DD 250, Doug Dagworthy is going to be at 250, but any other timekeeper, we will choose their standard rate. So this idea of having sub rates underneath a standard or a rate category is fabulous, because there's always situations where a lawyer is going to tell a client, I'm only going to charge you this much on this file. Well, I don't want to have to enter a brand new rate group just for that one case. I can create these sub rate groups, and it works beautifully. It's a great way to have special rates by file. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, we have another one that has a bit to do with hourly rates, and it's asking, when using the billable time and working time, would the invoice show the impact on the hourly rate? I.e., if you worked for 3 hours but only billed for 2 of them, would the hourly rate remain the same, or would it be reduced?
The hourly rate will remain the same.
Short and sweet, awesome. Next question. When doing a quarterly report for time productivity, billable, it only shows the year-to-date amount. Is there a way to show the monthly amount on this report?
Not that I know of, Alan.
No, not that I know of either.
I would like you all to notice how heavily I rely on Alan. He's my savior.
Okay, another one. Can we set the operating and trust payment methods to default off? It is cumbersome to turn on all the payment methods, to turn them all off if we are trying to search for EFTs only.
So when you do any report, yeah, I know what you're asking for. So what you want to be able to do is you want to come over here and you want to have one setting where you can say off and just choose an EFT. Right now, the answer is no, but you know what? That's an excellent suggestion.
Okay. Next question. What's the fastest way for seeing or editing your last docket on a file?
So I assume that means your last time entry. And I would say that the best way to do that is to go to File Manager. I would go to Ledger, and I might choose just to see my work in progress detail. And then I'd come in here and I would see my time entries that have not yet been billed, and I can edit. But yes, I do have to page down on the report.
All right. Is there a way to close a file within Soluno other than marking the file closed in Contact Manager and putting time entries on a manual hold?
Not at this moment, but I know they're going to do it because Doug is getting very tired of hearing me ask.
Okay. Another one. We're working with LegalX Bottomline Technologies. Would we still be able to upload an XML file to LegalX through a Soluno bill?
So I believe LegalX doesn't take, they also take a text file. It's just the format of the file. I don't think that Doug has yet done a LegalX format. And I know what it is. It has a header and then it has the entries. If you submit that as a request, I am sure that the guys at Soluno will create a new e-billing format for you. So I'm going to say the answer today is no, but that could easily be resolved. And I know they will do that.
Okay. We've got about 10 minutes left in our time together. Another question, is there a setting where I can change a vendor's invoice number after I've already billed out a client expense that was on it? Currently, once I bill out a client expense, it won't let me go back and change a vendor's invoice number if I find an error.
I don't think there is, Alan.
No. Once an invoice, it falls under those accounting rules. Once an invoice has been created, you know, no sort of information allow you to change it. But if this happens often, we could look at how we can do this. It's just today it's not available.
Okay. Another question about expenses. Is there a way to add a PDF for an expense to a file even after the expense is paid?
Not that I know of.
Is this through, the follow-up question would be, is this through the vendor doing it through accounts payable? After it's been paid, it won't let you change it now. Okay.
Yeah,
No,
so I'm not
So
yeah.
Here's my 2 cents on this. It would be really good if we had the ability to do a PDF download on operating out as well, not just payable.
And expense recovery too.
That's
we've got
correct.
those three. Yeah, we've got them in the queue.
Okay. Another question, how do we link our bank statements is the question.
So that is so wonderful. Great question. Under firm, under bank accounts, for each bank account, you need to fill in all of this information. This is very important, not the NACHA template, but the bank, the branch, the institution number. Once this information is provided, then when you go to banking and you go to your bank reconciliation, you select your bank account. Then you can just take your bank statement that you've taken off the off the bank's website in a QuickBooks format and drag and drop it right in here. I have many clients that are really using this for data entry because when you drag and drop that statement, it's going to match up everything it can on the bank statement, and any entries that it can't match up, it's going to show you in the reconciliation so that you have the ability to then create transactions from those unmatched entries. If you don't want to, you can delete it, but that's the way it all works.
Okay, there is another question about time entries. It says, on time entries, why do I have to retype the matter name in the next entry again for the same matter, but for different work? Is there a repeat feature?
Not yet.
Not yet. Excellent. Okay. I'm just looking at another one that's come in. Can we get a PDF of the email that sends an invoice to clients?
Can we get a PDF? One more time, say that to me.
It says, can we get a PDF of the email that sends an invoice to clients?
At this point, no, but remember, it's always going to be in the sent box of whomever you have set up in here. So whomever is sending out the email, that email is in the sent box. Now, I guess what I have some clients, what they do is they actually always CC themselves. So under the contact record or the file manager, they've added themselves always as someone to be CC'd on the bill. And therefore, what happens is they always get a copy. If that does happen, of course, you could always go into the calendar, pick up your email, and attach it to the file. I'm not saying it's clean and that it's great, but it is a way to get around it.
Okay.
But a good
We have another.
recommendation.
Yeah, it is. I have another question. It may require a bit more clarification, but I want to read it out now and give the person that asked it a chance to put in any extra qualifiers. It's asking, how can I take a report, like an invoice report with expenses and collections? I'm not sure if that makes sense, Deb, or if there needs to be some more information around that.
So how can we generate a report of all invoices that have been created and anything that's been collected on them? I mean, obviously my first shot would be a billing fees journal. And with a billing fees journal, you can ask for it with fully paid invoices or not. So if you look at a billing fees journal, it shows me every single invoice and what's been paid on that invoice. That's okay. I hope that's close.
Yeah, I hope that if not, please feel free to send in any clarifications. We got about 4 minutes left before the end of our time. Just a couple other questions. It's asking about NACHA. Where does the NACHA template come from? Is it something that needs to be created by Soluno? We currently have an Excel spreadsheet that we use.
Yes, the NACHA template does. The bank will give you the format. You send that to Soluno, and then they create the template for you.
Okay. Another question, is there a way to copy a transaction or make it recurring?
Not yet, but it is coming. I promise, because that's another one that's always on my list.
All right. Another question, can I import soft cost entries en masse?
Yes, you may. That is an easy thing to do. So if you go to the plus sign, if you go to expenses, you can, and if you need the template for this, I can give it to you. But just like there is a CSV file that you can use to import time, there is also one for expenses. What is the key on these import files is the header of the columns. So I do have lots of people who are using this, and basically you're going to drag and drop that file here, and then it's going to populate this screen, and you can then just take care of them. But as I do want to say, Doug has now created a program that will be able to pull the information from CopyTrax or any other photocopy machine. So if that's something you're interested in, please get in touch with the guys at Soluno and they'll help you with that, or the women at Soluno, the people.
Okay. One more here, going back to single PDF invoices, I don't email the invoices, they are sent via e-billing. Is there an option to use separate attachment for each invoice using e-billing?
Well, e-billing by default creates one invoice per matter. I think what you might be asking me for are the attachments that go for the payable, for the client costs. And if I'm not mistaken, those automatically get attached to the invoices when they're there, Alan?
Correct.
Alrighty. And I think we can squeeze one more in. It's asking, how many bank accounts can Soluno support?
As many as you want. No limit. I haven't tried it, but there's no limit that I know of.
Okay, excellent. And I think that is the end of quite a lengthy list. Do we have one more? No, I think that's it. Wonderful. Unless there's any other that come through in the last minute, we're getting close to the end of our time together. If there's any questions that come through that we aren't able to address during this session, we will make every attempt to look into them and get back to you directly. Debbie, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for an awesome presentation. You covered such an enormous amount of material in a very short time, and I'm certain people came away with lots of insights and found it very helpful. So thank you once again for being available for this.
It's
and I wanted
pleasure.
to thank everyone else. It's always great to have you. I also want to thank everyone else who was able to join us today. It was an amazing turnout. Just a reminder that you will be receiving a copy of the recording. We'll make sure that that gets out to everybody. There have been several questions asking for a copy of the PowerPoint itself. It's quite large, so we'll figure out the best way to distribute that as well. As you can hear, there's constantly new features coming along. Our development team is working incredibly hard, and we're always adding new features. So please follow us on social media, check out our website, and keep up to date on all the latest news. And so that's it from us at Soluno. I hope everyone has a great day, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.